Hey everybody, welcome back for another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're looking at the story of Joseph in Genesis chapter 40,
Yeah, it's a fascinating story with a lot of layers.
and it's really resonated with people throughout history.
Definitely. I mean, it's got it all: intrigue, betrayal, and ultimately redemption.
Yeah, so let's set the scene for our listeners.
Okay, so picture this. Joseph is in prison in Egypt.
Okay, unjustly imprisoned, right?
Right. He's been betrayed by his brothers and
Yeah, sold into slavery.
exactly, and ends up in this prison.
Right.
And in this prison, he meets two of Pharaoh's officials.
The chief butler and the chief baker.
You got it.
Okay, so we've got these three guys stuck together in prison.
And it's here that things get interesting.
Yeah, because dreams come into play.
Big time. So both the butler and the baker have these really vivid dreams.
The kind that wake you up in a cold sweat.
Exactly. And they're both totally freaked out because they don't understand what these dreams mean.
Of course. Who would be able to interpret something like that?
Well, luckily for them, Joseph has this reputation
For what?
for being able to interpret dreams.
Oh, wow. So they're in the right place at the right time.
You could say that.
So what were these dreams that had them so spooked?
Well, a butler's dream was all about this vine with 3 branches.
Okay, a vine.
Yeah, and these branches were just overflowing with grapes, like super ripe and juicy.
Oh, I could almost taste them.
And in the dream, he takes these grapes and he squeezes them into Pharaoh's cup.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like he's personally serving the most powerful man in Egypt.
that does sound like it could be a good omen.
Right.
What about the baker's dream?
Well, his dream was a little less appealing.
Okay, how so?
He dreams he's got these 3 baskets of bread on his head.
On his head.
Yeah, balanced right on top of his head.
Okay.
And the top basket is full of all these delicious baked goods.
Sounds pretty good so far.
But then a bunch of birds come along and start eating from that top basket.
Yikes. That doesn't sound nearly as promising as the butler's dream.
No, not at all.
So, how did Joseph interpret these dreams?
Okay, well, he listened very carefully to both of them.
Yeah.
And then for the butler, he said that the 3 branches represented 3 days.
Okay, 3 days until what?
Until he would be released from prison and restored to his position.
Oh, wow. That's pretty specific.
And get this, for the baker, he also said the 3 baskets represented 3 days.
Okay, so 3 days until...
3 days until Pharaoh would have him executed.
Oh, wow. What a contrast. One guy gets his freedom back and the other.
Yeah, a pretty grim outcome for the baker.
And these interpretations, they actually came true.
Exactly as Joseph predicted. 3 days later, the butler was back serving Pharaoh.
Wow.
And unfortunately, the baker met his unfortunate end.
I guess that really solidified Joseph's reputation as a gifted interpreter of dreams.
Oh, absolutely. Even in prison, his talents were undeniable.
So it sounds like this story is about more than just dreams.
You got it. There's some really powerful themes here that we can still learn from today.
So we have this story about dreams and interpretations. But it seems like there's a lot more to unpack here.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, what jumps out at you,
Well, one thing is how Joseph uses his gifts.
even in prison?
Yeah. He could have just kept to himself,
Right.
but he chooses to help these guys.
Yeah, he uses his talents to bring them some clarity.
Exactly. And I think that's a big takeaway for us today.
Like, even when we're going through tough times, we can still find ways to make a difference.
Right. To use our unique skills and talents to help others.
And maybe that's how we find purpose, even in the midst of hardship.
Exactly.
It's like we can choose to focus on what we have to offer rather than what we're going through.
I like that, yeah.
And another thing that strikes me is his faithfulness.
His integrity.
Yeah, he's been wronged in so many ways.
Absolutely betrayed by his own brothers.
And yet he doesn't let that poison him.
Yeah, he doesn't become bitter or vengeful.
He holds on to his values.
And that's a powerful example, I think.
For all of us.
Yeah, like how do we respond when we're faced with injustice?
Do we let it turn us into someone we don't want to be?
Or do we choose to stay true to who we are?
And another thing we see in this story is the importance of patience.
Patience and trusting in timing.
Yeah, like Joseph knows the butler will be released in 3 days.
But his own fate is still uncertain.
It's like a test of his faith.
And it reminds me that things don't always happen on our timeline.
Sometimes we just have to wait and trust that there's a bigger plan.
And that can be hard.
So hard. Especially when we're in the middle of difficult circumstances.
But sometimes that waiting, that uncertainty is where we grow the most.
I guess it's about surrendering to the process.
And trusting that things will unfold as they should.
And finally, there's this element of how Even chance encounters.
can have a huge impact on our lives.
Yeah, like Joseph's meeting with the butler.
Right. It seems like a random event.
Just two guys stuck in prison together.
But that encounter will eventually play a key role in Joseph's future.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah, like we never know how our interactions with others
Might shape the course of our lives.
exactly. So we should cherish each connection.
And be open to the possibilities that each encounter holds.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really makes you think twice about those everyday interactions, huh?
It does. We often talk about, like destiny and purpose.
Right, like it's this big predetermined thing.
Yeah, but this story suggests that maybe it's more about those small moments.
As seemingly insignificant encounters.
Exactly like threads in a tapestry.
And each thread contributes to the overall picture.
And we may not even realize the significance of those threads until much later.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the story of Joseph,
Yeah.
what do you think is the most important thing for our listeners to take away from this?
I think for me, it's the reminder that even when things are really tough,
Yeah, when we're facing challenges and setbacks.
we still have a choice.
A choice about how we respond.
Exactly. We can choose to give in to despair or
Or we can choose to rise above it.
to use our gifts to act with integrity, to have faith that things will work out.
It's like Joseph's story is saying that we're not defined by our circumstances.
But by how we choose to navigate them,
And that even in prison, even when it seems like all hope is lost,
there's still a possibility for redemption.
for finding meaning and purpose.
Yeah. And maybe even for making a positive impact on the world.
So to leave our listeners with something to ponder.
What would you say is the one question they should ask themselves today?
Well, after hearing this story, I think it's important to consider,
Yeah.
what are those unique gifts that we each carry?
The ones that are just waiting to be shared,
And how can we use those gifts to make a difference in the world?
even in the midst of our own personal struggles.
Yeah, because just like those threads in the tapestry,
Our actions, no matter how small,
have the potential to create ripples that extend far beyond what we can imagine.
that's a great point.
So until next time, keep diving deep into those ancient stories.
And see what wisdom you can uncover.
And who knows, maybe you'll find some unexpected treasures along the way.